Hi, everybody. This is Deborah Henne, host of Sounds Like Freedom. I'm here with Karis Meier. Karis and her husband have 4 children and reside in Northern Virginia. She holds a bachelor's in Christian education and a master's in counseling. She's a homemaker and spends her time writing, counseling, and engaging in women's ministry. Karis has struggled with chronic illness for many years and is passionate about sharing how God leads her through this journey. Her heart is to walk alongside others in their suffering and seek God's comfort and hope in the process. When Karis is not writing, you can find her enjoying the sun, taking walks, playing with her kids, watching soccer, and reading. Welcome, Karis.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey? You mentioned you have a chronic illness. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So just a little background. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents are missionaries, so we kind of moved around a lot, but enjoyed some cross-cultural experience living overseas some. I went to high school in Minnesota and also college there. Met my husband through my sister who went to Wheaton College. Shortly after we got married, I started losing a lot of weight and just feeling really horrible. And my husband's in the military, so we had just recently moved to Alaska, and his unit got deployed to Iraq. So I was alone in Alaska and trying to figure out what was going on physically. So several months into it, finally figured out I had picked up some parasites when I'd been visiting my sister in Pakistan several months earlier. And that kind of, eventually after many treatments, was able to get rid of them, but was never able to really return to my healthy self prior to that. And it kind of just affected different organs. So I had problems with my pancreas and kidneys and heart and, just kind of, it's one of those things that I kept thinking, maybe after this I'll get better and, I can get on with life. But it didn't go away. And it actually progressed and continued to get worse. So yeah, it's something that I, for a long time, kind of just tried to ignore and tried my best to live and not talk about it, because I didn't want to complain about. I knew there were so many people who had it so much worse, and but it really challenged my faith. It challenged mentally, emotionally. It affected so much of my life. And about 5 years ago, I came to a point where I had a sudden onset of neuropathy in my arms and my legs, and couldn't walk for a while. And it was just a really scary time, really uncertain about, what was causing it. And it was during that time where, a very low point, I think, where God started, in my brokenness, spoke to me pretty strongly about starting to write, about starting to open up and share with others about what God was doing through the hardships, through a lot of the struggles that I was going through more internally, and really also just open up more to the Lord and also to others about what I was going through. And so I did. I started writing, even though I felt like I don't have anything good to say at that point. I felt so despairing of life that I didn't even feel like I had any hope to share. But I think it was really in that brokenness that God showed me his grace, and his, his grace truly is sufficient in our weakness when we allow him to use us. And so, that's when I started I started a Facebook group called Suffering Well, and then started a blog. and then ended up at the beginning of this year kind of putting together a lot of the things I had written into a book. And so that's kind of where I'm at now.
Wow. And I love how you said that, you took those steps of obedience. God called you to do something. You say, God, I, what? kind of
Yeah.
And but you said, you know what? I'm going to be obedient anyway and believe that God is going to meet me right here, right where I'm at in my obedience. And I think that oftentimes a key part of living in the freedom of God, whether or not we understand that we are moving forward in obedience. And I think that is there anything that you can share with our listeners as far as that actual process of making your thoughts line up with what God was saying, even though it wasn't what you were feeling at the time?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey that I'm still on. I think when when we're living in um, a life, that is so different, maybe in big or small ways, depending on our situation. But I think I found myself in a place where I never imagined I would be living with chronic illness. I'd been very athletic growing up, played soccer and track. And so I just never imagined that as part of my lot in life. And so, especially so young. And so I think and I knew so much the truth of the Bible, and I knew who God said he is and what he can do, the miracles, that he can do in our lives. So to be living in a situation and circumstances that felt so very different from what I was reading in the Bible really challenged me to have to not lean on my own understanding, and to recognize that God's ways, like as he says in Isaiah, his ways are so much higher, beyond our understanding, and to humbly submit that before the Lord and say, okay, I'm gonna keep believing the truth. I'm gonna keep believing every promise that you give us, God. I'm gonna speak out your promises. I'm gonna declare your promises, even though I'm not really feeling them in my life right now, to some extent. I mean, I know a lot of the eternal promises that are still to come give us hope, but even like one of the verses that God has often spoken to me is, I believe I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, from Psalm 27. And so sometimes when I speak that, I'm like, oh God, it's hard for me right now to see your goodness, but I'm gonna believe that, because that is your word to us as believers. And I mean, ultimately, God's greatest goodness, right, is Jesus in our lives, and having the hope. And that just this morning, actually, when I was at the grocery store, the checkout lady was like, I was like, how's your day going? She's like, oh, I'm living the dream. And she was, I could just tell she was discouraged and sad. And I was, I just shared a little bit about, my struggle and how hard life can be. And, she just looked at me. She's like, how do you keep going? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you do it? And so I was able to just share with her about God and my hope in Jesus. And that's the only way, is his grace in our lives. And so just, I think, living in a place that doesn't always line up to who we think God, or what God should do for us, or what our lives should look like, can oftentimes be a testimony and a way to share, like, no, I'm going to keep trusting and believing in God. I know a lot of people turn away from God when things just are too hard, when they can't reconcile this good God with the horrible evilness of this world. But what a testimony when we're able to continue believing the truth, and the freedom that we have in Jesus comes from the truth in his word. So I think, it's it's still hard. I'm not, I wish I could say I'm at the place where it's, the joy of the Lord comes so easy, but it's something that I fight for every day. And, but he provides daily. So.
And I love that, thank you for being very honest. And I think that that's an important truth that, just because we know these truths, sometimes we don't always feel them. And when our life circumstances don't really line up with our view of how it should look or feel, it can be really hard. And sometimes it's a daily struggle. Sometimes it's a moment by moment struggle. But I love how you said, I'm going to stand firm in this. I'm going to declare it. I'm going to stand firm, and thought by thought, just surrender to Jesus and surrender to his truth. I love that. I think that's so key. And I know I found that to be key in my life too, that it's that moment by moment, I'm going to take this thought and I'm going to make it line up with Jesus's. I'm going to make it line up with the truth. If I have to verbally declare it, I'm going to do that, because sometimes my thoughts are very loud.
Yes.
And sometimes my mouth needs to be louder with the truth. And I think that's key too, giving up my quote unquote right to understand. And in that place of surrendering my right to understand, I exchange it for God's peace. And I think that's so, so key. I know that I have also found that verbal declaration, but also writing has been key to processing and aligning myself with God and with his truth. And it sounds like you've found that also to be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's something, I mean, I think I was able to process a lot of what I was going through writing, and through really struggling with a lot of questions. I was really wrestling with a lot of questions, and and just being able to, search the word and find the truth, and then, write that out, and also just relate to God. It was, I think for several years in the beginning, I was trying really hard to, I guess kind of have enough inner strength to hold it together myself, and not, I was so afraid to offend God. I was so afraid to even question God, because I wanted to honor him. I wanted to fear him, which I think is a good desire. But we see in the Psalms, how David and others who are closest to God's heart, they poured out their emotions to God. They and not always in a the most reverent way that we would think, how long, oh God, why are you letting this go on? Why have you deserted me, basically, and I think it was really through the Psalms that I began to grow in my intimacy with God, and been able to come to a place where he was the first one where I could turn to. He was the one that I felt, I think it could be a temptation to turn to other things or other people in our pain, which is not, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but we should first go to God, because he alone has the comfort and the love and the steadfastness that alone is going to satisfy. And so, yeah, I think it's and really learning that the presence of God, and coming in that place in our darkest, deepest, most painful moments is such a precious gift that we have, because he's always waiting for us.
Absolutely. And I love how you mentioned your support group. You're married, your husband, your kids, your parents, and now you are looking to come alongside others and be that support for them. Can you tell us about your work with that?
Yeah. So right now it's kind of changed over the years. I did do some counseling, but then when I started having kids, I put that aside and did more discipleship groups and more one-on-one things, just in my home, or when I could fit around, caring for the kids and moving around. We have a very transitory lifestyle with my husband being in the military. So it's something that I've kind of had to, ask in each new little season, like, okay, God, what does this look like right now? Through the blog and through writing the book, I've had it's just opened up a lot of doors to relate to people. Sometimes it's over email or text or phone calls or Zoom, but it's often, I think it's, through the being vulnerable that opens the door up for someone else to share, at least in my experience. Like I think sometimes we think, oh, like everyone else has it all together. But when we're able to share and, so being able to share in my pain, I think has just opened the door for other people to feel safe. And I've just had a lot of people just pour out their hearts and their problems and prayer requests. And it's kind of just opened up a lot of doors to share. And I also really have tried to not, recently, especially because I have very limited time with the 4 kids, is just to not have my own agenda, but kind of ask God, like, bring who you want and what you want me to do into my life. And I've just seen him so faithful to do that. Whether it be the person at the grocery store or we don't know who needs to hear God's grace and his mercy and the message of hope that day. But so I kind of have more of a open-ended, what that looks like right now. But I also work with the women's ministry at our church. So that's been a blessing.
Wonderful. Now, if people want to learn more about you, your ministry, and your book, where can they go to find that?
So my website is karismeier.com. So it's my first and last name, KarisMeier.com. And that's where my blog and information about the book, some bio and podcasts and different things are on there. Or you can go to Amazon. So the book is called Suffering Redeemed, Finding Strength to Endure, Purpose in Pain, and Hope for Tomorrow.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your heart, sharing about your book and your ministry. Don't forget to swipe, tap, or click over to deborahhenne.com. Follow me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Deborah Henne Author. And let's not forget to tune into our thoughts to make sure they sound like Jesus's, to make sure they sound like freedom.